Welcome to the Phoenix Infidelity Podcast, the podcast for betrayed men by betrayed men. Here we shed light on the topic of infidelity from a first-hand experience as well as from a professional counseling perspective. In order to access full episodes, you will need to subscribe at phoenixinfidelity.com. But we don't want money to be the reason for you not accessing these life-changing materials. So if you find yourself in a time where budget is a problem, just send us an email to info@phoenixinfidelity.com and we will get you on track to healing from infidelity trauma. Today we look at the psychology and brain science behind infidelity trauma. And we extract a lot of key knowledge on this topic from Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps Score. I truly believe that a good understanding of what happens at a neurological level when one is traumatized accelerates the healing process. There's just something about this insight that is empowering and liberating at the same time. Please note that this conversation is packed with info, and listening to this two-part series in smaller chunks might not be a bad idea, depending on how much focused listening your schedule might allow. Ready? We've got work to do. So I'm going to lead us into this conversation with a quote from the book, The Body Keeps Score. And Bessel van der Kolk writes, "Trauma robs you of the feeling that you're in charge of yourself. The challenge of recovery is to reestablish ownership of your body and your mind." So I've been thinking about infidelity trauma for the last few years, and I've been doing a lot of research with regards to what lies behind the trauma and why is it in fact traumatic, this event of finding out that your spouse or your partner has been unfaithful. And we're going to tackle a lot of info, and we're going to talk about what happens in the brain and treatment methods, etc. But just as an introduction, basically what happens is that your system gets overwhelmed. And if for some reason this normal response of fight or flight is blocked, it puts the system, the emotional brain, into overdrive. And it's like the electrical circuits continue to fire in vain because of this event that has prevented you from taking action. If you're prevented from taking effective action, you put the body into a context where it's not able to do what it's supposed to do in these types of situations. So, you can think about people, for example, that go through various tribulations and traumatic events, but don't develop PTSD or don't develop trauma symptoms at the end of the day, because within that situation, they could take action. They could run away from the tsunami, or after the hurricane, they could spring into action and help the people around them by gathering resources or whatever. So basically, what happens in this event of infidelity is you are trapped, and it's that feeling of being trapped that initiates these symptoms of trauma.
Yeah, it's absolutely a painful event for a person, and a disturbing and a distressing event for a person when someone that they trusted, someone that they relied upon, has betrayed that trust. And it just absolutely overwhelms them. It overwhelms them emotionally, psychologically, sometimes even physically. And they're no longer able to cope. They often have lasting symptoms, or it has a lasting impact on them, and it just causes them to, as you said, their body isn't able to function normally as a result of this.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is it's a combination of feeling trapped because you can't really do anything about the information that you've just received. You can't act out violently. Well, you can, but you know the consequences that lie, beyond that horizon of bad decisions. But it's also this loss of feeling safe because, in the book, again, The Body Keeps Score, it says restoring a sense of safety and empowerment is crucial in trauma recovery, because that's what's been taken away from you. And, a note that I made here, is that this is why infidelity trauma is such a shit show, because the one person that you thought had your back and you thought you felt safe with and you were empowered by this one person has let you down. I'll also add a link to a video where Jordan Peterson describes beautifully what exactly happens when infidelity is discovered, because your past has been ripped away from you. You're thinking, who did I marry? Who was I to marry a person like this? Your present has been ripped away from you, and your future has been ripped away from you. You have no idea where you are headed. So it's a complete disruption of fundamental truth. And I think that's the why behind infidelity trauma. It's like, why is this a traumatic event? Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, if you think about trust and you think about how trust is so valuable and important in any relationship, trust provides security, because we can trust someone who says that they love us or they care or they did it, and then we believe that. But when that trust is removed because of infidelity, it is a complete disruption of security. It's a complete ripping away of your foundation, and that is in itself traumatic, that loss of security, that loss of safety.
So, I mean, you can't really compare infidelity trauma to things like war experiences. I mean, if you think about what happened in the Holocaust and the concentration camps in the Soviet Union and things like this, I mean, there is a spectrum. There's a continuum of trauma. But let's just accept the fact that infidelity enters onto the spectrum. So we are dealing with something that is traumatic. And this is what this podcast is all about. This is what our counseling, this is what this project is all about, to help guys understand that it is trauma and to give them the tools to navigate this maze of confusion and the storm of infidelity. So let's delve into what happens in the brain. And we're going to start with just understanding a little bit about the difference between the right and the left brain. So for decades, we've had this cartoon version of the left being mathematical and the right being more creative. We now know it's much more complicated than that. But the truth of the matter is, most people, almost all people, do process language in the left hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is more responsible for intuitive, emotional, visual, spatial, and tactual tasks. Okay. So as opposed to the left, that's more linguistic, sequential, and analytical. Now, why is this important? Because in the book, The Body Keeps Score, they talk about most trauma occurring in the right hemisphere. You know, the left hemisphere is almost like the public relations that sort of makes up a story of why we just said what we said. But lo and behold, beneath the surface, 95% of this processing is unconscious, and your right brain picked up on, I don't know, 1 million cues that motivated you to to go down this train of thought, and then eventually say what you said or do what you did, and then make up a story of why you actually did or said that thing. So understanding this, we need to make sure that our listeners and the guys that are experiencing trauma understand that there are certain ways to connect with this right brain that's been traumatized. And You know, a lot of psychotherapists would suggest that just talking about it and talking about it and talking about it is the way forward and to get through this trauma, but it's not that simple. There are specific ways that we need to utilize the correct tools to connect with this right side of the brain, and that in itself is so important to understand, so that we don't waste time, and you know, that we could help guys to heal more quickly. Okay, so before we get to the treatment and, you know, ways to deal with the trauma, let's talk a little bit more about the brain, because I personally experienced a lot of these symptoms, and I didn't necessarily at the time know why this was happening, but it became clear to me the more I did research and started understanding trauma. So the first brain region we'll talk about is Broca's area. Now, Broca's area is extremely important for language processing, and I'll post a link in the comment section of a person that has Broca's aphasia, which basically means this part of the brain has been damaged. And it's almost like a drunk person trying to find the vocabulary necessary to construct coherent sentences, right? I remember experiencing this Broca's area going offline, where I, for the life of me, couldn't remember a really good friend that lived a few blocks away. I couldn't remember his name for about 3 to 5 minutes, and I was desperately wanting to get his name so I could find him on WhatsApp and send him a message in order to ask him if I could sleep on his couch. So this is a manifestation of what the trauma, of the effects of the trauma in real time that I experienced, where my language processing went offline. And, you know, the emotional brain hijacks the executive functioning. And this is where things could get dangerous. You know, you make decisions based on emotion instead of reasoning. And I wonder if you've ever heard of, experienced this in your practice. You know, maybe when arguments get heated, etc. And what would your advice be to the guys listening if this happens?
I think firstly, yeah, it's such a normal experience when we're in this space that we actually can't think straight anymore, because we are really in a survival space. We're trying to survive. This trauma is overwhelming us. We can't think straight because of actually our brain is trying to protect us from the pain of this trauma, and we're feeling perhaps disoriented, we're feeling confused. There's so many other feelings and emotions that we go through. It's definitely something that I experience in my counseling on a regular basis when couples come to me and then there's been any kind of infidelity. And it's quite normal. And I often have to tell people, you know, what you're going through is normal. You're not going to be able to think straight. You're going to have all these weird feelings. You're going to be angry. You're going to be disappointed. You're not going to be able to focus. You're not going to be able to remember things. Suddenly things will come to mind and you won't even know why. So it's a very normal experience. And I want to encourage our listeners to just not be hard on themselves during this time where they might be thinking that they're going crazy or they think that they are losing their minds. It is normal.
That's excellent advice. So the next brain region that he talks about in the book is Brodmann's area 19. This is very interesting because this apparently lit up in the participants that were, when words fail, these haunting images capture the experience and returned as nightmares and flashbacks. This is the brain region connected to those symptoms. So he says here, this is a region in the visual cortex that registers images when they first enter the brain. And he writes, we were surprised to see brain activation in this area so low.
If you would like more information on how to book a one-on-one counseling session, just send us an email to info@phoenixinfidelity.com.